I can't believe all you folks are in here with the sun shining as pretty as it is today. Thank you so much for coming and listening to this. Before I start, I want to give credit to a couple of people, well, particularly to Bill Fraser of Stanton, who documented all of the styles of architecture in Smithfield 40 years ago, wrote up descriptions of them. It's the basis for what I'm doing here today, and I learned a huge amount from Bill then and later. And also people like Roger Ely, who just are incredible and have been an inspiration to me over the years and taught me quite a bit as a layman. The idea is just to talk about our diversity as a town, and we're going to start off by talking about the styles that we have, starting with the oldest, Georgian referring to the kings of England during the 18th century and into the 19th. These houses, we have a few grand examples. This one is one of the grandest. They are always symmetrical in their style. Symmetry was a huge part of this architectural period. They used Flemish barn brick, often English basements with high basements and a very high first floor, 9/9 double hung windows, wood shutters. This one does not have it. This is a Barrett Folk building. Dormer windows were prominent, hip roofs, not in this example. Then we moved into the Federal period, which was our exuberant period of freedom. We were going to express ourselves through our architecture as well as other ways. This is the Grove, largely continued Flemish barn, although you beginning to find American barn, which is 3 bricks running crossways and 1 header, rather than very complex Flemish barn, which is tedious, time-consuming to lay. You'd find water tables, which is extended brick structure outside of the main wall and up above the water table. It shows up frequently. 9/9 windows on the first floor, and to appear to be a smaller building as it went, they would put 9/6 in the second floor. So continue to have dormers in many cases. Doric columns, arches were coming into play at that point. And Doric was a predominant column that was used then. Then we moved to basically after the Civil War with our architecture. And we moved to the very familiar Victorian period. Now this is, I think, it's one of my favorite little houses in town. It's Carpenter Gothic or Rural Gothic. You also find this style in churches throughout the country. Bethany United Methodist Church is somewhat Carpenter Gothic. It's a gorgeous church. It looks like you're in New England when you look at it, with tall tower and steeple. Very vertical. They used scallop shingles, a lot of board and batten siding, these verge boards, which were at the edge of the eaves. Brackets came into being, as did sawn railings and decorative columns. Totally different is the Italianate vernacular house. This is right near the cottage there on Church Street. You find bay windows coming into being with these. Very broad eaves, big boxed eaves, box gutters in those eaves, and very shallow roof line. You can't even see the roof in this. It's tin roof. They were able to do it because they had tin, and they built shallow roofs. 2/2 windows, big pane windows, lots of light. Corner porches in many instances like this. The next style is probably the most often built in Smithfield. It's the vernacular front gable. They're all over the place. These were inexpensive to build. They're very similar, all of them are very similar. They have tall gables, some decoration on the gable. They have a return box. This is a box gutter and then or eave, and then a return on it comes back in here to frame it nicely. 2/2 windows, always sawn railings and columns and brackets, getting well into the Victorian period. But a nice simple home and one that a working family could own, could afford to buy. We also have a really neat example of a bungalow. We don't have a lot of these around. This is over on James Street. It looks like, it's designed to look like it has these dormers, full dormers. Actually, the line goes up like, the construction goes up like a two-story house with a shallow roof, but they added this feature so it gives it the appearance of having a dormer up here, but this is mainly decorative. The columns, you begin to see these brick or concrete bases with the wood column on top of them. Find some 6/6 hung windows and these unique columns. Now, this is a Queen Anne cottage, a story and a half. The most unique feature of it is that the porch is not only on the side here, but it extends out from the front and gives you a double gable appearance here. Very neat looking porch arrangement and roof line. They have decorative woodwork in the gables, lath-turned porches. I'll talk about the columns later on when we get into the construction, but they have lath-turned columns. That's kind of the beginning of the Queen Anne thing, and then we get a little fancier, and this is called a simple Queen Anne. This is over on Main Street, a lovely house, and it also uses broken eaves with multiple gables on the eaves. Getting a little fancier here with bay window arrangement, decorative porch rails and columns. And this one has 101 panes. That's coming into being. Then we have what I call anything but simple. This is, of course, the Julius Gortney House, and it's a magnificent building. This is the full exuberation of Queen Anne. It's also referred to, I came across this term recently, it's called free Renaissance. It means it has Renaissance elements such as a tower. Renaissance had towers like this, but it's just whatever you want to do. And that's kind of what they did. The round towers are important to them. Decorative siding, this fish scales used here. They had big dormers, ornamental gable caps, these fancy caps up here, ionic columns in this case, and all of it's just massive when you get to this point. How do we get here? When you start off in the 1700s, mid-1700s, if you wanted a house, you basically found a builder, he bought a little box of tools, and you started work, and it took several years to get a house. You had a local sawyer, bricks were made local, everything was local and very little factory. And this is a slow way to get lumber. But in the 1700s, this was still very typical. You've seen these at Jamestown, I'm sure. The pit saw. I've always thought the guy on the bottom had the worst job during colonial times, or one of the worst was he's underneath that thing hour after hour. And it go repeatedly through a log and get boards. And that's how they got boards before they had sawmills. Few simple tools like this is a foot adze for hewing, bricks on site or nearby. When I was a kid, I was always told, well, you know, they brought the bricks over on ships from St. Luke's and went up the creek there, and it was deep, and they built. They built the bricks on sites within a mile of the church there somewhere. I think we have found one or two depressions where the kilns were, but you just dug up clay locally, you fired it, and that's where you got your bricks, same way you got your shingles and everything else. So it's very, very basic. One board at a time, and you got a very nice house, but you got it one copy at a time, and it took a lot of time to do it. Then we started having technology, and with new tools where you could do whatever your mind envisioned. We have all these styles for one primary reason. We never went broke in Smithfield. Williamsburg died when the capital was moved. It just sort of went dormant, and everything that was there stayed there or fell down, but it didn't change. This place is an active and prosperous port for 1750, actually before that. they were shipping in and out of here to the early 1900s. And so it was important to Southside Virginia to have this port to bring things in and out. People here who had connections with that and import-export business and other businesses made money. Now the reason they were able to was technology. The biggest invention was in saws. Now this lady I'm going to tell you about was Sarah Tabitha Babbitt. She was a New England, Massachusetts shaker. Very rigid religious sect. Ladies who were shakers were liberated before liberation was even thought of by most women. And she was a tool maker and an inventor within her community. And Miss Babbitt started messing with a round saw blade. They'd been doing this in Europe a little bit, and she somehow came across the thing and started experimenting with it, put it on something like a wheel spool thing, and that with a foot pedal, you could turn it and it would cut wood, but very poorly. And then she decided, well, maybe it would work on a mill. So it had local mills, of course, and she got some help and rigged one of these blades to a grist mill. Lo and behold, it would cut a bunch of lumber. Now the neat thing about Miss Babbitt being a shaker, she was not allowed to, nor did she want to, take out a patent. The religion said if the mind creates something, the person has an obligation to share it. And so this circular saw was shared with anybody who wanted it, and the sawmill was born. Once that was done, you could saw a bunch of lumber in a hurry. So that was probably the biggest thing that came along. Actually, in the very late 1700s, 1790s is when she invented this thing. And by the 1800s, you had some really large sawmills. Then somebody invented the scroll saw, and I don't know where that first started. Most of this stuff had some origin in England. But once you had a scroll saw, you could cut curves. And then somebody came along with a bandsaw. And with a bandsaw, you can also cut curved material. All of this stuff developed into a huge industry up north. Big factories in time after the Civil War were able to cut decorative materials of just about anything you want, including gingerbread of all sorts, factory cut to your taste. They created catalogs, Victorian house designs, and materials design. You go through and you pick the house style you want and pick the trim you want. Steamboats. We haul lumber north from Virginia. The Surrey Lumber Company cut timber all the way from here near Alloway Courthouse back to the other side of Surrey County and shipped it out by steamboat. The lumber went north, mostly yellow pine. It was cured, sawn, cut into fancy stuff, and shipped back down here. You could order everything for your house just about. You still would get siding cut locally in a sawmill locally here. But windows, doors, balustrades, banisters, just about everything could come by steamboat down to Smithfield. And you could have the house of your dreams, most of it factory built. It was a huge business. But the windows that you see in the first houses, they were all built one at a time. So from many parts come the whole, and that's what you have here. And then you find the elements that we have all over town in these houses. Friezes, they are horizontal bands of sculpted or painted decoration, and you find them in all kinds of varieties. A lot of them are real simple little, just molded, a molding nailed together like this, and painted contrasting colors. There's another one under an eaves, and they're usually framing eaves work underneath an eaves of a house. This is also a frieze of sorts, and this is nothing in the world but saw cut board, extends the full length of the porch, but it came from a factory cut like this and used as a frieze, decorative frieze on a very simple little house. And then you have The Ephraim is in Smithfield, and that's on the Jewish Courtney House. Tremendous piece of work there. And how it survived, I don't know, but it's been taken good care of. Jews did, and the current owners take excellent care of that house. Then you have gable treatments, barge boards, or verge boards. You come to the verge of the eaves, the edge of the eaves, and some of them very decorative, like this one over next to Hayden's Lane. That's a gorgeous piece of work. Again, that came from a factory and was attached to the house. Then fish scale boards to give it a nice treatment in the gable. Here's another treatment. These are tulips, kind of, sort of, used to decorate that gable. These, I think, are probably grapes. Again, also sawn cut in a factory. Now, this is the eye treatment, sunburst and eye. This one's on, I believe, the PD Gordon House. A magnificent gable there, together with the arched, columned window treatment. Pediments and window crowns. This is, I think, the finest one in Smithfield. That's on a Todd house with the wine glasses across, and all this stuff was hand carved. Now, understand, this was done at a time when that was hand carved, every bit of it. And that's just an incredible piece of work, real treasure. This one is on Hayden Hall. Notice the symmetry of the arches, and then framed again. You change into an A frame, but it's symmetric with this whole business, and it's just magnificent. A dental work was prominent. Little pieces of dental work around here. Similar treatment, simpler one. This is on what we call Simpson brick house on one of the Simpson houses on Church Street. The name goes way back. This is on the Barrett house. Come back to their column later, but again, a unique gable treatment. And here's another. This one's on the Barrett house, the large Barrett house down on Church Street. And this is on the Moody house. Even though this stuff was factory made, consider the amount of work that went into just putting it together. I have added some of that to our house, and it's tedious work. Then window crowns, just a decorative crown for a window, sort of a little ledge and sheltering the window. Some of them get to be very decorative, like this one. And this one uses a sort of an A-frame arrangement. And then the columns, this is back to the P.D. Gordon house. And this one is the house next to Hayden's Lane, I'm pretty sure. If I miss one of these, tell me too. Brackets. Boy, you wouldn't have Victorian houses without them. And there are all kinds of brackets. From this very simple, these are just square. You can still buy reproductions of just about exactly like this. These are real typical. This flowing style here. This is a little more unusual. And you have spool work. Whole section of spool work that goes between the columns. The Aiken is popular. And these are semi-vines, more or less vine treatment that you find in all kinds of places. Again, I'm not sure. I think this may be another Aiken treatment here, just sort of a decorative version of it. This is on the Brad Face house. Very, very nice set of brackets. Eve brackets, also fundamental to this whole thing. You find them all over Smithfield. This is pretty typical of what they look like. This is combined with a dental approach and a frieze and two brackets on either side of it. And same thing here, just far more decorative down on the Moody. Again, far more decorative here on the Gordon house. Thanks to the Greeks, we got columns all over the place. We use columns everywhere. There are simple Doric columns, Ionic columns, and Corinthian columns, are the three basic styles. And the Doric column is one that is most often replicated, even in modern columns, even in factory cut porch columns. Just basic collar around a column. And even in a square column, you'll find basically this treatment, but in a square framed column. The Ionic column makes a bit of a statement. This one's on the Berman house. You also have them on the Grove and a number of other houses here. Again, the factory ability to turn out things allowed the manufacture of round columns simply. These are turned out of a solid piece of wood on a lathe. They're all over Smithfield. They vary a little bit in style, but they're all based on Doric columns, more or less. That's where they get the idea. There's a variation of it. A lot of them have a squared area and a turned area. This is on the Barrett House. I love these columns. That's one of a kind column with the inlay this was purchased, but they built the frame and just applied this to it. It makes a really neat column. There's a Corinthian, and I have not found one in Smithfield. If anybody knows where one is, I would love to find it, but they are really more public building columns, very elaborate. And then you go to the railings at the bottom of the porch. They start with the simple, such as these. Turned railings are very popular all over Smithfield, and again, they were shipped in here. You'd buy the railings, and then you'd cut basically 2x4s for an angle for them to fit in, and the cap up top, the railing. That's a more elaborate lathe turn railing. And then the scroll saw. These are nice ones. There's a huge variety of these in town. Then these are a little nicer, still a little better. And then wow, that one's on the far end of Church Street on the right-hand side, just before you go down the hill. That's a magnificent porch. Really the nicest cut railings I know of anywhere around. Siding varies as you go around town. A beaded siding is a style used by very early construction. German siding overlaps and ends up having a flat surface appearance. Fish scale comes in a variety of shapes. I use this one on what I call the Harris house, is now the Hess house. But all of these are fish scale siding, but you notice they're very different. More fish scale styles. Board and batten on the cottage down on Church Street. Vertical siding, and that's it.